So give me just a second. I have to make sure there's no echo when this first opens up. Just about there. Don't tell me we're going to have broadcast issues tonight with YouTube. It's looking like it. Nope. Okay, so, all right, they are all set on their end. Now, can somebody let me know if I can be heard okay? Make sure I don't have an echo or anything. Just put me a message in the chat that I'm good to go.
No echo.
Thank you, Sister Handy. Appreciate it. All right. So now, so last week we talked about the backward pull. All right. How when we're running, there are things that seek to pull us back. So this week I want to talk about not just running, but running with a purpose. Okay. And what we discuss on tonight is going to be very, very important. So I hope that you guys, not that you guys don't normally pay attention, but tonight, really, really pay attention to what I'm saying. All right. So running with purpose and discipline, that's the word that I want to look at tonight. Discipline, discipline. Now, this is going to be important. So come with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Okay. 1 Corinthians 9, and then jump down to verse number 24. We're actually going to read verses 24 to 27. This is a very familiar passage of scripture from the Apostle Paul. It's probably already highlighted in your Bible. All right, 1 Corinthians 9, beginning at verse 24. Now, this is what he says. Do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I don't run like someone running aimlessly. I don't fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified from the prize. Now, the first thing that I want to highlight here, and this is going to be important for what we talk about tonight, Paul says that athletes don't just run, but they run to win. Okay. So if I'm running to win, that means that every stride that I take has a purpose. Okay. The way that I move my arms, the way that I move my hands, all of these things are working together to help me win this race that I'm in. I'm not just doing this aimlessly. Now, when you look up discipline in the dictionary, this is what you'll find. Discipline is the purposeful action towards a specific goal. Okay, notice it didn't say discipline is action towards a specific goal. It said that discipline is purposeful action towards a specific goal. So in other words, I'm not just doing things, but I'm doing purposeful things that are designed to help me reach my goal. Now, let me take it back to athletes for a second. So athletes, when they exercise self-control, athletes do, but they exercise self-control not just during the race, but also when they're training. They consider things like diet and sleep. They practice. They have focus. All of these things that they do are designed to help them reach their goal, which is to win the race. Okay, so their discipline is purposeful. Everything that I'm doing for a reason. Stay with me here. All right. So for us as Christians, okay, discipline means that we structure our lives in a certain way. We make certain choices. Okay, we use our resources in a particular way. We give our attention to certain things because when we started, remember, this forward vision was being like Christ, Christ-like. So when we talk about discipline as a Christian, we always take purposeful action, and all of the actions that we take are designed to make us more like Christ. Just like that runner is focused on winning and he does purposeful things to win, that's what we mean when we talk about discipline as a Christian. We take purposeful action, and the things and the actions that we take are designed to make us more like Christ. That's why they affect so many different areas of our life. Okay, so everything that we're doing, I'm not just doing things, but I'm doing things on purpose that are designed to make me like Christ. Okay, so keep that idea in your head as we go through this. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I want to define the difference between worldly discipline and godly discipline. They're not the same thing. And as we go through this, you're going to understand why. Okay? Worldly discipline versus godly discipline. So let's start with worldly discipline. Worldly discipline is all about what they call willpower. That's the source. Willpower is the source. In other words, I force myself to do something. I will myself to get up and do this, even though I don't want to do it. I exercise willpower. You hear that word a lot. Okay, now understand about willpower. Willpower is self-generated. That comes from you. That's why they call it willpower. It's self-generated, but it's also self-sustained. If the power to do it is coming from you, then the power to sustain it also has to come from you. Okay, that's the primary thing about willpower. But the problem is this, okay? When the power that you have is depleted, then your willpower is also going to be depleted. And if your discipline is based upon willpower, it's going to fail. I'm gonna speak more about that in a second. So if I am operating off of worldly discipline, which is governed by willpower, the circumstances of life, things happen that impact your willpower, your ability to resist things, your ability to be consistent with things, okay? And because willpower is self-sustained, when you don't have the power to sustain it, discipline's going to go out the window. That's worldly discipline. Now, the flip side of the coin is godly discipline, okay? And godly discipline obviously is empowered by the Spirit. It's not based upon you, okay? It's it's empowered by the Spirit. It is sustained by grace. So it's not up to me to sustain the Spirit's power. That comes from God. And what I mean when I say it's sustained by grace, I mean that while I'm trying to be disciplined in a godly way, when I make mistakes, the grace of God continues to empower me through the Spirit that lives on the inside of me. So in other words, that power to get back up and get on my feet is not coming from me. It's coming from God. This is why it can be sustained, okay? That's why Paul could say, when I'm weak, I'm strong, because I've learned that God's power is made perfect in weakness. So when I don't have the strength, God gives me the strength. This is godly discipline. It is not fueled by my power. It's fueled by God's power. This is what makes the difference. Okay? Stay with me, because I'm gonna tie all of this together. So we have worldly discipline and we have godly discipline, right? Now, come with me to Philippians chapter 2. And this verse you probably don't have highlighted. Philippians chapter 2. We're going to look at verses 12 and 13. Right? Philippians chapter 2, verse 12 and 13. Now watch this. Philippians chapter 2, verse 12 and 13 says this. Paul says, therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed. not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That part you might have highlighted. Verse 13, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. That verse right there. It is God who works in you. Now, let me explain something to you here. Discipline from a worldly perspective says, I have to work harder. From a worldly perspective, I have to work harder. But discipline from a godly perspective thinks like this. This verse says that God is at work in me. That's what verse 13 says, God who works in you. So godly discipline, it's not about me working harder, but it's about me working harder with God who's at work in me. If you understand what I'm saying. So worldly discipline says, I got to work harder. Godly discipline says, God is already at work in me. What I need to do is work harder with him. In other words, I need to cooperate more with the one who's at work in me. That's godly discipline. So I don't work harder for my own benefit. I work harder to cooperate with the God who's already at work on the inside of me. There's a subtle difference there. And that's the key. God says, I'm on your side. I'm trying to help you. But he says, godly discipline says, you've got to give me more of an effort in terms of your cooperation. I'm already working in you, but I need more cooperation from you. That's godly discipline. That's different than what the world offers. Right? You see what I'm saying? Right? We want godly discipline, not worldly. Let me show you some other things. There is a difference in focus between godly discipline and worldly discipline. Okay? Worldly discipline says this. Worldly discipline is self-focused. How do I improve myself? Okay? Worldly discipline is normally about personal goals, personal achievement, success, that kind of thing. How do I improve myself? And then what I do is I measure and I say, am I better now than I was before? Or am I better than other people? That's worldly discipline. That's the focus of worldly discipline. But the focus of godly discipline, it's not how do I improve myself? Godly discipline says, how do I become more like Christ? Godly discipline. That's my focus. How do I become more like Christ? And my motivation for doing so is not pride, which is worldly discipline, because I'm trying to be successful so I can look good in the eyes of other people. So my motivation is pride on the worldly side. But on the godly side, my motivation is not pride. I'm trying to be more like Christ out of love. I love Christ. So my motivation is love. My motivation is gratitude. I appreciate the things that Jesus has done for me. So these are the things that motivate me. And then when I seek to measure, I don't say, am I better than I was? When I measure, I say, am I more like him? Am I reflecting more of the character of Christ? Am I thinking more like he does? That's how I begin to measure. That's godly discipline. Because remember, the goal of godly discipline is to be Christ-like. And every action that I take, purposeful action, that's discipline, purposeful action towards a goal, every action that I take is designed to make me more like Jesus. Because I'm not just running aimlessly. I'm training like that person who's trying to win the race. See, in worldly discipline, right? The world seeks to have you make a better version of yourself. Now think about that for a second. Make a better version of yourself and live your best life. Worldly discipline. But if yourself is flawed and sinful, think about it. If I'm trying to make a better version of myself, I'm flawed and sinful. So I'm only making a better version of a flawed and sinful person. But when we talk about godly discipline is not about making me a better version of myself. Godly discipline is about transforming me into the image of Christ. Big difference. So I'm not trying to make a better version of me. I'm trying to be more like Jesus. That's not a better version of me. Because we said in Bible study before, when we compare ourselves to ourselves or to other people, we're doing a comparison against the wrong thing. Because we're not the object to be compared to. Christ is. So anytime I compare myself to anyone or anything other than him, I'm always falling short of the mark. So worldly discipline says, be the best version of yourself. Godly discipline says, be transformed into the image of Christ. That's what we're trying to be. Okay. We talked about being able to sustain it before. I talked a little bit about that earlier. Willpower. That's what I called it. All right. When you are operating from a worldly standpoint as it relates to discipline, eventually you're going to get tired because we're not perfect. We don't have unexhaustible resources in terms of energy. We're going to get tired at some particular point. Circumstances get hard, life gets tough, you get sick, whatever it is, okay? If it's built on your ability, it has to fall at some point because you run out of strength. Right? Anybody, let me tell you this. Anybody who is operating off of willpower is eventually going to fail because willpower is unsustainable. Why do you think? So we're in the month of February. Okay, we're in the month of February. Now, at the beginning of the year, we talked about New Year's resolutions. People always make New Year's resolutions. Now, studies show that most people by the 8th week or the 10th week, they've fallen off. Know why they've fallen off? Because they're operating off of willpower. That's why they fall off, because willpower is unsustainable. You cannot keep it up. Eventually, you're going to run out. But when you're operating off of godly discipline, okay, it's not your power that's sustaining you. You're sustained by the Spirit. Okay, God is the one who provides the motivation. You don't have to motivate yourself. God provides the motivation. Okay, and when circumstances get hard, watch this. When circumstances get hard, you lean on Him. That's one reason why your energy doesn't wear down. When you're operating off of willpower, when times get hard, you have to dig down and find some energy to address what's coming at you. But when you're operating off of godly discipline, I'm leaning on Him, whose power is unexhaustible. Okay? So there's a difference. So we've got to get out of trying to have worldly discipline, and we've got to get into godly discipline. Okay? So remember, willpower always depletes under pressure. It's going to happen. You will run out of willpower. And the other problem is in worldly discipline and looking at it from the world's perspective, you're aiming for the wrong target. Right? Will you develop discipline from a worldly perspective? Sure. But you know what? Do you know that you can be a disciplined sinner? You absolutely can be a disciplined sinner. That's the best, that's the better version of yourself. I'm a sinner, but I'm a disciplined one. But that doesn't help, but that doesn't help you. There is no transformation there. That's the big problem. There's no transformation. There's no transformation there. All right. So our focus has to be about godly discipline. It is not the same as what the world calls discipline. We're Christians. Okay. We have two different views. And like Paul, we're training to be Christ-like. And every action that we take as we prepare in this race is designed to help us, is designed to help us be more Christ-like. That should be the plan. That's supposed to be the plan. Okay. So how does this tie into the topic of the Bible study? Because the topic of the Bible study is having a forward vision. Okay. So how does this godly discipline tie into having a forward vision? Let me tell you very clearly, okay? Without discipline, you cannot have this forward vision. Without discipline. You can't, there is no way in the world you can maintain a focus on being like Christ if you don't have discipline. It's not going to happen. There are too many things that come at you on a daily basis. And if you don't have the kind of discipline that I'm talking about, focusing on Christ is going to be an issue. It's not going to happen. All right. But discipline is what causes you to keep your eyes on him. You have to be disciplined to keep looking at Jesus. Let me give you a perfect example. It's one that I always love to give because it makes people laugh. All right. I got to be disciplined and always focus on Jesus. Now, when I don't have the kind of discipline that I need, let's say somebody in the church does something that offends you. You heard them talking about you over in the corner, whatever. And one of your old issues was you had an anger problem. You cuss people out at the drop of a hat. And now you just heard somebody say something because they said it within your hearing. Now, if you're not focused on being Christ-like, you know what you're going to do? You're going to go over there and cuss them out. This is why I said you have to have discipline in order to maintain the forward vision. Now, don't get me wrong, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later in the study. This is not about being perfect. Stay with me. I'm going to tell you something that's real important later on. It's not about being perfect, but it is about being focused. A person who is training for a race that they know they have coming up does not go to a party that's going to keep them up all night and potentially expose them to things that's going to impact their body and hinder them in the race. They don't do that. So I'm not going over there to that party because I'm focused on the race that I have to run. And I know that if I go to the party, right, I'm definitely probably not going to win this race because the effects of the party are going to make it hard for me to win. Okay, bring that into this Christian race and we're focused on being like Christ. Even though I heard this person talking about me, if I now go over there and cuss them out, that does not help me in my race to be like Christ. Just like that runner in the physical race. The runner in the physical race understood that my attempt to win the prize is more important than going to that party that's over there. I'm going to hit on that later on as well. My desire to be Christ-like is more important to me than going over there and cussing you out because I heard you talking about me. That's godly discipline. That's why I said maintaining this forward vision of being Christ-like requires that you have discipline. You can't do it if you're not disciplined. It has to be there. right? If you don't have discipline, right? You know what you do? You look at Jesus on Sunday, but you look at something else on Monday. That's no discipline. You've seen people who are Christian when it's convenient. But when your Christianity will cost you something, they start to drift. That's not discipline. That's not discipline. Discipline keeps you right where you need to be. All right. When you're not disciplined, when you're not working towards godly discipline, you may have what's called spiritual intensity. You can cry and shed tears, right? Spiritual intensity. I heard a word from God, something hit home with me. All right. Spiritual intensity is there, but when you're not disciplined, what you won't see is growth. So you can get it, you can get intensity and emotion, but what you don't have is growth. You're not growing. Or at least you're not growing in the right direction, because we proved in week 1 that everybody's growing in one direction or the other. You're either getting closer to Jesus or farther away from him. So we shouldn't want just intensity. We should want growth. All right. So you need to have discipline in order to maintain the focus, the godly focus. Okay. Now, when I started, I said discipline was purposeful action. That was the word that I used, purposeful action. Okay. So if I need this godly discipline to maintain the focus, the forward focus, watch this. If I'm going to be forward focused, and we're still talking about discipline here, if I'm going to be forward focused, it means that I have to make certain choices on purpose, intentional choices, right? If you meet anybody that you consider to be Christ-like, hear me clearly tonight. If you ever meet anybody that you consider to be Christ-like, they are not Christ-like by accident. That didn't happen accidentally. Okay? They are Christ-like because they intentionally made certain choices that pushed them in the direction of being Christ-like. So discipline means that you make intentional choices on purpose because you understand where they're getting you to. So that means this. Watch this, okay? That means sometimes you choose the difficult choice of being obedient over the comfortable choice of compromising. So I choose to be obedient, even though I know that making this choice is going to make it harder for me than it would have if I compromise. But I intentionally make it. Why? Because I know that making it helps me maintain that focus of trying to be Christ-like. Godly discipline, right? I intentionally choose to grow and do the hard work associated with growth versus taking the easy path and not growing. Because growing requires that you make sacrifices in order to grow. One thing that I hit upon in the church all the time, we talk about Sunday school, we talk about Bible study, because in those things, you learn the most. You can ask questions. You can get questions answered. That's what it's all about. But understand, participating in either one of those things requires a sacrifice on your part. If you go to Sunday school in any church, in most churches, Sunday school happens before the main service starts. So that means that in order to go, you have to make an intentional choice to sacrifice time to be there. It's the same way with Bible study on Wednesday night. It is the middle of your week. It is 7:30 in the evening. There are other things that you could be doing, but you intentionally make the choice to be there. That's an intentional on purpose choice. So I choose to make that decision because I believe that it helps me grow. That's intentional. And it's not always easy. Okay. I choose purposely, I choose kingdom priorities. Sometimes choosing kingdom priorities means that you won't see a lot of earthly success. But I choose the kingdom and its priorities over other things which could cause me to see more success down here. But it's a choice. It is an intentional choice that you make. And if you're going to maintain the forward vision, it means that you have to make intentional choices. I make this on purpose. It's not an accident that I made this decision. I made it on purpose, understanding what it would cost me. But like the runners of the race, right? Discipline says I take purposeful action. I take actions that I know that are designed to help me reach my goal, which is to be like Christ. And they're not always easy. Okay? They're not always easy. Maintaining the forward vision also requires endurance. This is one of the ones that I said I was going to hit on later. Go to Hebrews 12. You've seen this one before. Hebrews chapter 12. Verse number 1. Hebrews 12 and verse 1. Guaranteed is highlighted in your Bible. If you are any kind of serious Bible study scholar, this verse has to be highlighted in your Bible. Come on, people. Hebrews 12 and 1 says this: therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, watch, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. So not only casting aside the things that are slowing me down, but the writer of Hebrews also said, you have to run the race with endurance. It takes discipline to endure. It takes discipline to endure. Because if you don't have discipline, you know what will happen? You'll start strong, but over time, you'll fade. No discipline. You see it. People who join church, and when they first come, they're excited, operating off of emotion, whatever. But if you never put things in place in your life that are designed to help you, that are designed to create this discipline in your life, you'll see them start strong, but over time, they'll fade. They'll fade. They absolutely will fade. Endurance says, I keep running even when it's hard to run. I don't quit. I keep running. I might not run as fast when it's hard to run, but guess what? I am still running, but I'm not running as fast because it's hard to run now. The people who run in the Boston Marathon, when they hit Heartbreak Hill, they're not running as fast. And they call the hill Heartbreak because so many people give up the marathon on that hill. But it takes endurance to get over it. So some people say, you know what? It's going to take me a while to get to the top of Heartbreak Hill. I might not get to the top as fast as some other people, but I'm going to stay focused and get to Heartbreak Hill. Why? Because I'm focused on finishing the marathon. But it takes endurance to be able to do that. And without discipline, you'll have no endurance. See, discipline produces the steady, sustained movement, right? The steady, sustained. Notice I didn't say at constant motion. No, the race is, I'm steady, I'm always running, okay? Sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but I'm still running. It takes discipline in order to endure. All right? You have to have discipline. This is why the Bible speaks of one of the gifts, self-control. Right? The Spirit helps us with self-control. That speaks to discipline. So we've got the Spirit of God living on the inside of us, that helps us out in these areas. Okay. Now, how do I develop this discipline, Pastor Allen? I'm glad you asked me. Right? How do I develop it? Because I want to have it. Okay. So understand something. I'm not trying to give you like a formula. Like, do these 5 things or do these 6 things. I'm not trying to give you a formula. Okay. But what I am going to do is I'm going to identify the things that cultivate the capacity for discipline in your life. So in other words, when you begin to do these things, okay, the capacity to be disciplined begins to develop in your life. But don't see these as do this, do this, do this, do this. No, think about I'm doing things that are helping me to cultivate the capacity to be disciplined. That's what I'm doing. All right. So one thing that will help you be disciplined is you have to have a clear vision of your goal. Okay. Hear me clearly on this one. You can't be disciplined if you have a target that's vague. Okay. You got to have a clear vision of what you're after. So here's a perfect example. Your goal is, you say, you know what? I just want to be a better person. That's vague. What does that mean? I want to be more spiritual. That's vague. What does that mean? What does more spiritual mean? What does a better person mean? That doesn't mean anything, right? But a clear vision of what you're after looks something like this. Your goal says this: I want to become more like Jesus in his character. I want my character to be more like Christ. That's clear. That's not, I'm trying to be more spiritual. That's not, I'm trying to be a better Christian. That is, I want my character to be more like Christ. I want my priorities to be more focused on the kingdom. That's clear. That's how you begin to develop the capacity to be disciplined, because you have a clear focus of what you're shooting for. When it's vague, you won't be disciplined because you don't really know what you're shooting for. It's just kind of sort of floating out there in the ether. I want to be a better person. You got to define it. Be more specific. What is a better person to you? What does that mean? Get specific, because now I know what I'm shooting for, and I also have a way to measure whether I'm going in that direction. If I say that I want to have a character that's more like Jesus's character, I know what Jesus's character was. So now I can look at my life and how I handle situations, and I can begin to see, is my character starting to look like his or is it not? I have a way to measure. Okay? So the clearer your vision of Christ or Christ likeness, the clearer the vision that you have of that, the stronger your capacity to develop discipline is going to be. You got to be clear. Okay? Be clear about what you're shooting for. Some people aren't clear about what they're shooting for because they don't believe they can hit it. That's why they leave it vague. All right? But when you're really trying to hit something, you get specific. And when you talk about goals, you put a date on it. I want to lose weight. That's vague. I want to drop 20 pounds by this date. That's different. Now you can see what you're shooting for, and there's a clear way to measure if you're going that way. And if you put a date on it, you understand. Let's say that you put the date out 4 months away, and then you spend the whole first month not doing anything. Well, you know right away, I'm probably not going to hit that date because I took a whole month and I did nothing. So I'm probably not going to hit the date. Okay? So you've got to get specific. and clear about what you're shooting for. That's how you begin to develop the capacity to be disciplined. Okay? You have to be convicted that the goal is worth it. This is what I was talking about. This is what I was talking about earlier, right? Paul, in that passage of scripture, he said, those people who run in that race, watch this. Paul said, those people who run in that race are running for a crown that won't even last. Do you know what they gave you back then when you won a race? They gave you a crown that was made out of laurel leaves. In other words, they would pull these branches off of the laurel plant, and they would kind of sort of twist them into a crown. And when you won the race, they would put that laurel leaf crown on your head. Now, understand something. If you pull these branches off of the plant, as soon as you pull the branches off of the plant, those things are already dying. So I run this race to get a crown. I'm talking in the real world. I run this race to get a crown that's already fading away by the time they put it on my head if I win the race. And Paul says, understanding that that crown won't last, they still get their lives disciplined and do all of that stuff because to them it's worth it. Okay, so if our goal is Christ likeness, trying to be like Jesus, and there are things that we have to do in order to become like Christ, unless you believe that it's worth it, you're not going to develop that capacity to become disciplined. Because the runners of the race only discipline their lives because they want that laurel leaf crown. Paul said, we're working for a crown that won't fade away. They get disciplined over something that's dying when they put it on your head, and Christ has promised us a crown that won't fade. So his point was, how can they show more commitment to the fading crown than us who are promised a crown that will never fade away? That's his point. So you have to be convinced that it's worth it. Let me tell you something. When you have weak conviction produces weak discipline. Weak conviction will produce weak discipline, guaranteed. But strong conviction will produce strong discipline. They go hand in hand. All right. So you've got to have deep conviction about the value of what you're going after. Then you develop the capacity to be disciplined. Another thing is this, right? You got to be honest about your condition. Listen, if you're going to be disciplined and go after a goal, you got to be honest about where you are now. You can't lie about where you are now. So let's say that you want to be able to do 25 push-ups. That's your goal. You want to be able to do 25 push-ups. But you got to be honest. Okay, how many push-ups can you do now? Don't lie and be like, well, I can already do 10. You get out on the floor, you can't. You're lying. Don't lie about where you are now, because if you're lying about where you are now, chances are you're not going to get to 25. So you lie to yourself and say, I can do 10. And then you get down on the floor and realize that you can't do 10, and then you get discouraged. Know why? Because you lied about where you are now. Stop lying about where you are now. Be honest. Look at what Paul said, right? Paul said, I beat my body so that after preaching to others, I don't find myself lost. Know why he said that? Because Paul said, I understand that even though I am an apostle, there are still things that I need to do to make sure that I'm right. Because I don't want to preach the truth to others, and then at the end of the day, I find myself lost because they lined themselves up with the truth and I didn't. So I got to beat myself. I'm being honest about where I am. So you got to be honest about your condition. If you want to be disciplined, right? Discipline says you got to be honest, right? When you're prideful, pride will teach you that you don't need discipline. That's what pride will tell you. You are right. You don't need to be disciplined. Humility says you need discipline. Humility says you need a whole lot of it. You need a whole lot of discipline. So you've got to be honest about where you are. When you're honest about where you're starting from, that also gives you the capacity to develop discipline in your life. You got to be honest about where you're starting from. You know, everybody has to start someplace. I know a lot of people feel bad about where they have to start from, but guess what? Feeling bad doesn't change that that's where you are. It doesn't change. I mean, you can feel bad. Everybody's entitled to feel however they want. But the truth of the matter is, feeling bad doesn't change that this is where you have to start from, and you got to work your way out of. So godly discipline says being honest about where you're at. If you're trying to go to Texas from Massachusetts, you drive it in the car. You're trying to get to Texas from Massachusetts, you can't act like you're in Tennessee. That's not where you are. You know, if you act like you're in Tennessee and you're supposed to be going to Texas and you're really in Massachusetts, right? Along the way, you're going to get discouraged. Why? I'm supposed to be there by now because you acted like you were in Tennessee. You weren't in Tennessee. You were in Massachusetts. But when you're honest about where you are in Massachusetts, then you say to yourself, I'm going to have to ride for a little while before I get there. That's being honest. Same thing in this Christian walk. Developing the capacity for discipline requires you to be honest about where you are. Okay. Another thing, you have to also, it's helpful to be in a community of people that are also running towards the vision. You ever wonder why athletes train with other athletes? Right? People who run marathons, you know what they do? They join running clubs. You know why? Because discipline gets strengthened when you're a part of a community of people that are disciplined. That's why they run with the running club. Because the running club goes running every day. They're disciplined. So if you're going to be a part of them, it means that you also have to be disciplined if you're going to run with them. Right? And there are some who run in the circles that are really, really good. So if you're going to run with them, guess what? You got to step up your game. All right? Believers develop discipline when they're surrounded by other people who share the same forward vision. You got to be around other people that share forward vision. You know, if you want to be Christ-like, you got to hang out with people that are Christ-like or that are trying to be Christ-like. Hang out around people that ask themselves the hard questions about their condition, the hard spiritual questions about their condition. You know, they challenge you. You can't be in no group. Watch this. You can't be in no group that's working hard every day and trying to train, and you don't do nothing, right? No, they're gonna tell you. They're gonna be honest with you. You're lazy. Look at you. You're lazy. We get up every day, come out here and run. You call yourself running, trying to be a part of the runners, trying to be a part of the runners club. You're trying to be part of no runners club. You're lazy. That's what they'll tell you. So now, either you're going to step it up and start running because you claim to be a runner, or you're going to quit and go do something else. And if you quit and go do something else, you're going to prove that they were right. They said you weren't a runner. They said you weren't a runner, because you can't just say that you're a runner and then never go out here and practice with the runners. You got to run. Listen. I growing up, some of you know I played basketball. That was my sport. Played basketball. And I ain't ashamed to say I was real good. I wish I had ran into Kenny, because Pastor Kenny Sims from he talk a lot of trash. He and I talk a lot of trash. I don't know how we were in this city together, and I never run into him when I was younger. But as I always tell him, he would have felt the wrath. I don't care that he's taller than me. He'd have felt the wrath. I dusted a lot of dudes that were taller than me. It wasn't uncommon. But I bring up basketball to say this. One of the ways that I got better playing basketball was I would go and play people who were at a higher level of basketball ability than me. because it forced you to make changes to your game. You can't go in that circle with those tired old skills. You got to make changes to run with them. That's how I got good. This Christian life is the same way. You're trying to be Christ-like, you claim, but you associate with people that aren't running a Christ-like race. That's not going to work. You got to run with people that are on point, trying to be Christ-like. Because when you're around them and they're more on point than you, that forces you to step up your game. That's how you develop this capacity to be disciplined. Okay? But it's also easier to train when you're training with somebody else. People who lift weights know you train with somebody else. People who run know you run with somebody else. Normally, when you run with somebody else, you run longer and go farther because you're running with somebody else. It's easier to run. Isolation is not your friend. When you're trying to be disciplined, isolation ain't your friend. You won't be disciplined when you isolate yourself. Isolation weakens discipline. Guaranteed. It guaranteed it weakens discipline. You will not be disciplined off by yourself. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But being a part of a community of people, a group of people that are running, those things reinforce discipline. So it's easier to be disciplined when you hang out around disciplined people. Okay? I hope some of this is sinking in. I've shared a lot of information tonight. All right? Now, what does discipline produce? You know, not just this forward vision. What does it produce? Let me just give you 4 quick things, and I think I can get through this. One of the things that discipline will produce is consistency. Okay? Not perfection. Consistency. Perfection happens when you see Jesus face to face. But down here, what you want is consistency. All right? Being consistent is when I stumble, I get up and I get back into the forward vision. That's consistent. Being consistent says I fell, but I got up and I keep moving. I recalibrate to make sure I don't fall like that another time. And I keep running. When you're disciplined, it develops consistency. You need discipline to be consistent. All right? You also need discipline also produces that endurance that we were talking about before. Remember, we always say that we're not running a sprint, we're running a marathon. Okay? It takes discipline to endure. Because there's peaks and valleys in this race. There's health and sickness. There's money and broke. I'm in the church, and the church is getting on my nerves. Peaks and valleys. Okay? But discipline produces endurance. I'm still running. Discipline says I refuse to get out the race. I ain't getting out of the race. That's what discipline produces. It produces endurance. Why? Because I still believe that being Christ-like is worth it. So I'm still going to run. Discipline also produces transformation. Right? See, a lot of people gather information about Jesus. They can quote scriptures. They know theology and stuff like that. But if you notice, they're never transformed. It takes discipline to be transformed. It doesn't take discipline to acquire knowledge. Not necessarily. You can know a whole bunch of stuff, but does the stuff that you know have an impact on how you live? It takes discipline to do that. So I can know the scriptures, but it takes discipline to be transformed by the scriptures that I know. I got to be disciplined in order to be transformed. All right. So discipline is important. And finally, it also takes discipline, as I said earlier, to finish strong. You don't want to just start strong. You want to finish strong. That takes discipline. That's the only way that it's going to happen. So to sum up what we talked about on tonight, remember, When we say discipline, we're not talking about what the world talks about. The world's talking about willpower and all of that. We're not talking about willpower. We are not going to be sustained off of us. If you're trying to be sustained off of you, you're going to fail. And if you have failed in the past, I hope that what we have talked about here today has enlightened you and showed you, wow, I've been relying on my own power to try and be disciplined. And that's why I can only go for a certain period of time and then I give in. That's why, because willpower does not sustain you, because your power gives out under the right conditions. So anybody who's operating off of willpower, it doesn't happen. When I used to go to the jail, I'll tell you this quick story. When I used to go to the jail, I used to tell the guys this funny story about willpower. So imagine a person goes to the liquor store, right? And they go buy whatever the drink of their choice is. They bring it home and they put it in the refrigerator, right? And then they start praying, Lord, don't let me drink the liquor that's in the refrigerator. I got to be strong. Lord, don't let me drink the liquor that's in the refrigerator. Now, every day they open the refrigerator, you'll see the liquor there, right? Lord, don't let me drink the liquor that's in the refrigerator. Operating off of willpower. Lord, don't let me drink the liquor that's in the refrigerator. You know what happens with willpower? Eventually, that prayer changes and it goes like this. Lord, don't let me drink the rest of the liquor that's in the refrigerator. Because that's what happens with willpower. Willpower gives out. And when willpower gives out, you give in. That's why you can't operate off of willpower. Real discipline is empowered by the Spirit. Okay, so that's what we want. So when we talk about discipline, we're talking about godly discipline. Okay, I'm trying to work harder with God who's working in me. That's what I'm trying to do. I want to cooperate with God more, not less. That's godly discipline. And when you begin to do the things that I've talked about here on tonight, you begin to develop that capacity to have this discipline, okay? And to keep that forward vision of being Christ-like. Remember, our target is Christ-like. That's where we're trying to get to. I want to be more like Christ in how I talk. Remember, we're being specific. I want to be more like Christ in how I act. I want to be more like Christ in how I treat people. I want to prioritize the kingdom's business. We're getting specific about what we're after, because discipline can get us there. And when we believe that it's worth it, okay, when we maintain that focus and say, you know what I'm chasing, I really believe is worth the chase, that's when things begin to happen. Listen, we're out of time. We've gone over by a minute. So brothers and sisters, I hope that you guys have gotten a lot out of what we've talked about here on tonight. Now, next week is going to be week 5, and that's going to be our final one in this series. Now, what I want to look like, what I want to talk about next week is, so we've been talking about maintaining a forward vision. Now, the question is, how do I do that in every season of my life? Okay, because as we live, we go through different seasons of life. And how do I maintain this forward vision in every season of my life? So when I'm a younger person, how do I maintain that? When I'm middle-aged, how do I maintain that? When I'm older, how do I maintain that? Whatever season that I'm in, whatever I'm experiencing in that season, how do I still maintain that vision? That's what we're going to get into on next week. All right. So you got to come back and finish this thing out. All right. This has been a powerful, awesome series. I've learned a lot myself in preparing myself to bring it to you guys. So it's changed my view on a couple of things. So I pray that you guys have gotten a lot out of it as well. Come on, let's pray. Father, we thank you on tonight for what we've had a chance to talk about. This idea of being disciplined, God. There are so many things that will be impossible for us until we develop godly discipline, which is what you call us to. My prayer that as a result of the conversation tonight, that people have not just been encouraged, but they have really learned something that they can sink their teeth into, and that it can help them to mature and become the godly man or the godly woman that you wanted us to be. Now, God, as we prepare to depart from the meeting, watch over us throughout the rest of this week. I pray that everybody that's here will have the opportunity to worship you on Sunday in spirit and in truth, either online or with the saints in person. That's my preference. This is my prayer on tonight, and I pray in Christ's name. Amen. God bless you guys. Once again, it's always my pleasure to be here. I appreciate you guys being here. There are a lot of you that are in this room on tonight. So I'm really encouraged by the saints that are coming out. Let's get together again on next Wednesday at the same time. You know, we always ask the question, is there a word for the Lord? You guys have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you real soon. God bless you.